What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining us on episode 52 of Arkansas Prep Extra, powered by Scorebook Live. I'm Kyle Sutherland alongside Nate Olson, and we have somewhat of a different setup after doing strictly audio. I guess somewhat of the same one, but different at the same time, because for the past year, we've been doing strictly audio for the podcast, but some of you may be checking us out on YouTube as well on the SB Live Sports page. Like I said, it's on YouTube here that we post all kinds of different content from our various markets throughout the company. But either way, however you're listening, however you're watching, we're glad that you took some time out to recap week 8 with us and get prepared for week 9 of this season that has just flown by. But Nate, we had some excellent games across the state, and 2 of the best were right here in our backyard with the Mills Robinson finish there that they had with Mills going for 2 and Robinson stuffing that one. Of course, we'll talk about it. And here in just a couple of minutes or a couple seconds, we'll be talking about the Bryant Cabot finish, which is where we were at Everett Field on Friday night. What a great finish that was. I think that Cabot really showed a lot, but also too, Bryant showed that they continue to be the number 1 team as they have for so long now.
A lot of takeaways from this one. Let's start with the crowd. I was not at the game when Deion Sanders came to town a couple years ago at that school in Texas, but was told that was a pretty good crowd. I've been to most of the playoff games since this run occurred, the big ones anyway. I can't recall a crowd that was this good. I think this is one of the better crowds post-COVID. It was awesome. It was electric. It was like a playoff atmosphere. Half the town from Cabot came down too. The whole stand was full. We were in that press box on that side, so we got to see that crowd up close and personal. It was great. It was an awesome atmosphere, a very good football game, and entertaining to the fans. And the other takeaway, a couple takeaways. The other one, Cabot. I think they're a legitimate state championship contender after seeing this game. I'm not losing a lot of sleep if I'm a Cabot Panther. I mean, you want to be the 2 seed coming out of here and not the 3, but you're in control to have that 2 seed. And you've already beat one of the big 2 in the league, Conway, lost to Bryant, but that was not a 14-point game, Kyle. You know, the final score says 14 points. Cabot gave Bryant everything he wanted. And their lines are big and strong and tenacious. And they punched Bryant right in the mouth at the beginning. And Bryant reeled a little bit and came back. And here's the other takeaway, a main takeaway. During this stretch, it's now 48 straight games, correct? 48 with in-state opponents?
Yes. So I was thinking that it's, I know that there's some that are saying it's 49, but I went back and I counted about 5 or 6 times. And I think that some are counting the Trinity Christian game that you just talked about from 2020. Yeah. I think some are counting that game. Now it happened in state. It happened at Hornet Stadium.
That's an out-of-state opponent,
right? An out-of-state opponent. So yes, it is by my count and by a couple of others that I've talked to, it's at 48. Yes.
So during that stretch, particularly the last, let's say 8 or 9 games, or the last year or so, the streak has been tested, and there's been some breaks that Bryant's needed. You know, during one of those years, the games were not close. And then last year, Bryant, I mean, they were facing a loss right in the face at Conway. I mean, I was still not sure how they pulled that one out. Then in the state championship game, Fayetteville gave him everything he wanted. In the North Little Rock games last year, the regular season, the playoff, North Little Rock has golden opportunities to get Bryant on the ropes and cannot do it. What I'm saying is during this time, Bryant has gotten a lot of breaks, a lot of bounces. And I think that just happens when you're a good team. You look at like the Bulls during those runs, those years, and some of the college football teams we've seen in Alabama, is like they don't think they can lose. And I think sometimes they will their way to win. And even if there's some adversity, they're like, okay, if we can stay in this or get back in it, something good's going to happen to us in the fourth quarter, and we're going to win the ball game. But if you do look at some of these plays and pull them out, there's some miraculous type things that have happened. Not so much miraculous on Friday night, but some bounces, some calls, a roughing the punter call. I mean, those little things, and those don't happen every day, Kyle. And It seems like Bryant gets some of those. And I'm not saying that they're getting them I'm just saying, but they are taking advantage of those. If you're an opponent, you cannot do that. Kind of like with North Little Rock last year, the jump pass that they called on 4th and short down there and threw it to their big defensive tackle, and Bryant stopped them down there 4th and inches. And then the clock ran out on them at halftime when they were down on the 1 yard line. So 2 chances of touchdowns, nothing. You cannot do that against them. And they've gotten those plays time and again. And the crowd really willed them in the fourth quarter too. It was one of those, it was a great atmosphere. And I need to go on. I need to be at West Little Rock Studios by 9:30 or so with Rex Nelson. And I kept looking at my clock. Thank goodness this game went by quickly.
It was over by 9:15.
Yeah, I left with about 5 minutes to go because I knew that if I stayed till the end, the traffic would get me. So I did leave after the go-ahead touchdown. But the game was not over. I mean, I think Cabot still had a chance, and then Bryant gets interception, but I couldn't pull myself away from it. I just could not do it. I told Rex, I said, man, I had to see it. It said it was compelling football, and one of the better games that I've seen, in a while with the atmosphere, the stakes, and the hitting that was going on. I mean, it was a really good football game.
Yeah, I think the difference in it, you mentioned at the very beginning of the game that Cabot was really, especially that first drive, they were really having their way with the Bryant defensive line. By the second quarter, TJ Lindsey, Ivory Gilmore, Tyler Mosley, all those guys, and there was a lot of others that were in the second group. I remember number 98, number 92. I can't remember their names off the top of my head, but I just remember them making a lot of plays, whether it be a sack, whether it be a QB hurry. They were all over Aboen, and Aboen was hurting there. I don't know if I should say he was hurting, but he was definitely uncomfortable. He got up slow a couple of different times in the second half. And, what a great performance by him, really for the whole Cabot team. But I agree with you. They definitely showed what they are. They're still going to be, of course, our rankings will be out. Our Power 25 will be out by the time that this podcast releases, but they're going to stay at number 2. And I don't see how you can't put them there because they beat Conway. They just lost to Bryant there in the last 2. Like you said, the score was not indicative of how the game, of how exactly was, because Bryson Adamo got that interception right there with 3 minutes left. I'm going to kind of backtrack a little bit here because I think I was a little bit hard on Scott Reed and the not really so Scott Reed, but just the call. And I'll say this too before I say this. There's a reason why Scott Reed is a 3 or 4 time state championship head coach, and I am a media member. But I was a little bit hard on them going because they went for it on 4th and 8 on their own 35 with 3 minutes left. Now they still had 1 timeout, and I personally, just my opinion, again, this is why I'm not a coach, I probably would have punted in that situation just because your defense had played so well throughout the game for the most part, and then you give yourself a chance. Now I do see why they went for it when they did, because again, Bryant too, as well as the Cabot defense was playing, that Bryant offense was also milking the clock just like Cabot was. So I do understand why they went for it and gave themselves a chance. I think that really there probably would have been fans that have been upset had he punted. There's probably some that were upset if he went for it. I don't really think that there was a wrong call there, but what I will say about Cabot is their only losses are to the number 1 team. This is one of the best teams in the entire region throughout the last 3 or 4 years in Bryant, and also a Ruston, Louisiana team that's sitting at either 6 or 7-1 right now. I know they only have 1 loss, and they're one of the top teams in Class 5A in Louisiana. So to me, they are the unquestioned. I know that you could make an argument for Conway too, because Conway did have that off night against Cabot. But the fact of the matter is, even though Cabot did take a loss to an in-state team, to me, honestly, say in the big picture, they might have looked better than the way that Bryant has in some games throughout. If you talk about the big picture overall, just because there was plenty of games that Bryant really hasn't played a complete game, but that's why they are on a 48 game in-state winning streak, is because they can play for 48 minutes and they've done it for so long.
Yeah, they figure out a way to win, and it didn't bother them that it was 10-10. What was it at the half? Was it, or 10-7?
10-7 at half, yeah. And then
it didn't bother them that their offense wasn't putting up a lot of points. Their defense kind of got punched in the mouth and then stiffened up. And the thing about them too is Buck James is a great head coach, but he would be the first to tell you that his staff, he has a great staff. Yeah. Those guys, and you sit by about 8 of them up there in the press box.
2 of them are Broyles Award winners, to the 2020 Broyles Award and Kirk Bach, and then 2022 Quad Sanders. And Quad Sanders was just on the other side. And then what a job and the adjustments that they made.
You've got a whole brain trust up there. There's several junior high assistants that are up there, kind of giving some input. You've got so many guys that are watching this and giving suggestions. And, you knew that their gears were turning after that first drive. Like, what are we going to do to stop them? And then, you saw that they were bringing the safeties down. There were some wrinkles there then, and then that bothered Cabot. And then you talked about the big guys up front, Lindsey, Gilmore. They got to him, and then this time they weren't letting him go. He slipped out of their hands a little bit, but that time those times he didn't. And I thought Lindsey was very impressive. Sam Pittman's in the house, watching him the second half. Feel like he elevated his play in the second half too. 4 tackles, a sack, tackle for loss, and a forced fumble. That's a good solid stat line from a Division I type recruit like he is. And that was a big part of it. It was getting pressure on Owen. They figured out a way to do it, but they're very good tacticians. And if they happen to come out and don't play well on the fly, they're and maybe not even wait until halftime in this case to figure out something that they've done wrong to put those kids in a position, because you've got athletes all over the field. You've got to move those chess pieces around, and they do a brilliant job of it. I also thought Walker, the quarterback, Jordan Walker, was pretty good. He had pretty good stats. They didn't make him do a lot, but he made some key plays. The pass he made to Torian Singleton late in the ball game on that go-ahead drive was a big-time throw. Kind of had to throw it down the field at an angle, across his body a little bit. Singleton's as sure-handed as there is a guy around, and I don't know if they've used him as much as they'd like to, but I mean, he was wide open, and Walker found him. So that's a guy that's only going to get better and better. He is a prototypical Division I type quarterback, a dual threat guy, and you can tell he's getting more and more comfortable. But that's a big stage when you're a sophomore in a game like that. And now the games are only going to get bigger now the next few weeks into the playoffs. So I think this was a good thing for him to experience this crowd and the hoopla. It's homecoming week. And I think that was a good thing for him to be involved with. And I think he answered the call in the second half, especially.
Yeah, and we've looked forward to it. It seems like we've mentioned it on just about every show, really, from week 0 until now. You don't want to look too forward, but these are the weeks that, especially with these games that we're going to talk about, even in the lower classes too, that this is when it really begins to count. It's counted plenty of times because you got to build up your conference resume and try to get those top playoff seedings. But, Bryant's got North Little Rock at North Little Rock next week, a team that, look, North Little Rock's won 3 straight games, but other than the Parkview game, they have not looked good against top competitions. But you know that they are going to really bring it on Bryant. Of course, that week 10 game with Conway, then when on senior night, when Bryant welcomes the Wampus Cats, that's going to be huge as well. So, there's still plenty, you like where Bryant currently is sitting. If you are the Hornets, if you're Buck James and the Hornets, but still plenty of work left to do. But they made a really good statement there. I think that many were, because Bryant has been good for so long, and they're not just completely blowing out people every single week anymore. They still are doing that some, but it seemed like 2019 and 2020, and even last year, it was pretty much a consistent thing. I think that I had a lot of people tell me that Cabot was going to get the upset, and they came pretty dang close to doing it. But it still was a great statement made by Bryant, and still also a great showing by Cabot as well. So going to be interesting to see that over the next couple of weeks, how the 7A Central plays out. But also, too, want to give a shout out to Bentonville. They moved into our top 5 this week. They're going to take that 5th spot. It's nothing against Greenwood whatsoever. It's just, I think that with the top 10 wins that they've had over the past 2 weeks, it's really hard. They've been sitting at 6 for a long time because I really liked Greenwood's strength of schedule overall. Just a little bit more, but then you beat Fayetteville in that last second, then 31-30, coming back and being able to do that. I don't think they came back in it, but I don't know if they ever trailed in that game. But nonetheless, they still won at 31-30. And then you have a massive win, 44-16 over Rogers. Just really was never close. Rogers, I think, certainly is a legit top 15 team. They've been in the top 10 a couple of times, but they are certainly, it's not even debatable. They are a top 15 team. So Bentonville making a big statement there. I'm not quite sure, Nate, that I like Bentonville. We might see this in the state championship or late in the playoffs. Who knows what happens? I'm not sure how I like them against a Bryant or against a Cabot for 48 minutes. I really do. When you look at our rankings, we are clearly extremely high on the 7A Central, with the top 3 teams being from there. I think that they certainly match up well. I feel they matched up pretty well for the most part against Conway in week 1. I know their defense didn't play very well, and Jody Grant was very displeased about that. But they are definitely a state title contender. I'm not saying that. I'm just not quite sure how they match up with a Bryant just yet, because I don't know that they've seen a defense quite like that. Now, Conway's defense has really improved and gotten better as the season's gone on, but Bentonville, nonetheless, regardless of who you think they can hang with or who they can't, they are a state title contender and have really made a statement over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think particularly this week, Fayetteville's a good team, but it took everything they had to beat them on their home field. But then Rogers to just blow them out, I think that's a good Rogers team, and I think that this is indicative of what they've done the last several years, of where there's a pretty large divide between them and the rest of the pack. And now they've kind of lengthened that out. They didn't beat Fayetteville by a lot, but you can maybe say that there's not quite as big a gap there. But I think, and playing Bentonville West, they'll prove that too, that they're the legit number one, and then there's some distance there. And then that is the next question, like you said, how do they stack up against the Central? I would even contend that Cabot would maybe be more physical than them too. There's three teams there that could be more physical. And if I'm a Bentonville Tiger, that sits in my craw a little bit, hearing that. I want to play them, and I want to prove that the West can play with the Central and that there's physical. And certainly you've got Joey Sua, one of the better linemen in the country, and that offensive line. But we saw how good that Bryant defensive line is, and the Cabot front seven. You've got to come with your hard hat and lunch pail to play these guys. And that will be a good showdown if it happens. I think that Bentonville is physical. That's been their brand. I like Nye at quarterback, and I like Ficklin at running back. I think that those guys are two really good skill players. They poured it on offensively the other night, and they have put up points this year. If the defense plays like they did against Rogers, they've got a chance to beat some of these teams. But like you said, they haven't quite seen the sort of brand that's down here in the Central. And that's the thing. But I think Jody Grant's a great coach. They've got a terrific program, a history of winning. You've got to put them in there in that group, of championship caliber teams, and you'll get the number one seed if things continue the way they are. You control your own destiny and play some home playoff games. But that's going to be really interesting to see from the Central. And we've still got a couple games to play, and we can't assume Bryant's going to win both of them, but who would be the second and third team out of that group that would be on that side of the bracket that might have to go to a Bentonville like North Little Rock did last year and won, remember? And so
Cabot did it the year before that in 2020.
Yes. Yeah. Right. So that's going to be, and then you think about too, if things kind of stood the way they are now to end, and Bryant was able to win out, Conway would be the 3 seed, right, out of there.
Yeah.
And Cabot would be 2. Would you want to see Conway coming to see, to your place?
I think they probably have a better, because those first 2 weeks for Bentonville, of course, they beat Booker T. I think it was Booker T. Washington, but still had a bad showing defensively. And that was when, we've talked about it many times, Jody Grant straight up called out his defense. And when Jeff covered that game and just talked about how I can't remember exactly what the quote was, but basically said that there was some guys who seemed to want it more than others, and they've responded to that. They've done a great job. I mean, I know they gave up 30 points to Fayetteville, but Fayetteville is one of the highest scoring, probably one of top 2, 3.
Well, they've got one of the better quarterbacks around,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so they answered that call. They really took that to, I think they took it personal in a good way. It was constructive. Coach Grant wasn't dogging anybody. He was just saying what he saw, and they took it as constructive criticism, and they did something with it.
Conway's your third-ranked team right now, or our third-ranked team. And if they lost to Bryant and it was close, you wouldn't drop them too much. So that would be the third place team in that conference that you would have to beat, in that quarterfinal round, maybe, or semifinal, quarterfinal, probably. I just wouldn't want to see Cabot. I mean, and we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen at Bryant, but let's just say it's a close ball game. Bryant wins it. You're going to consider Conway as a title contender too.
Yeah.
I mean, their only 2 losses would be to Cabot and Bryant, which are the top teams in the state. So that's a tough draw. If you're number 1 seed on that other side playing any of those 3.
Yeah.
So So I'm really looking forward to this, to the playoffs, to see how it's going to all shake out. I'm looking forward to seeing if if Conway can challenge Bryant 2 weeks. I'm looking forward to see if North Little Rock can. And the thing is that we talked about early, North Little Rock has the dudes to line up. I mean, if there's one team that's got the dudes to go mano a mano with Bryant, it's North Little Rock. They got guys, they got athletes all over the roster, just like Bryant does. So that hasn't been the problem the last couple meetings. The problem has been execution. So you match up with them, you're not getting blown off the football, but there's been some execution problems. When you get down in the red zone late before the half, you got to score there. Time ran out on that drive. The jump past Braxton Johnson, it didn't work out. And it's one of those things, Kyle, where you make that play, you look like a genius. If you don't, people criticize you. It's a tough spot. But I think the other thing when you play Bryant is you're trying to throw out the kitchen sink against them too.
Yeah.
Because that sometimes, a sneak up the middle isn't always going to work because they've got 200-300-pound guys in the tackles.
Yeah.
So they were trying to, and that play with Johnson almost worked, but that's the key. That's the key for them. You match up with them, and Malachi Gober's playing better at quarterback. You're on a run. Now you've got to make sure that when you have those plays that come down the stretch, or even in the first half, you get inside the red zone, you got to punch it in. But I think they're playing well enough right now that if offensively they get a couple of breaks and could score a couple touchdowns, that they can push them into the fourth quarter. I really do. But they're going to have to play smart, and you can't have dumb penalties, and you've got to take advantage of opportunities, which they haven't been able to do the last couple of times. But I don't think they're going to come out there and Bryant's just going to blow them off the football and ram it down their throat, because they got guys, they got athletes all over that roster, and it looks like they're playing better, and that the ship's been righted a little bit, and they would love nothing better than to knock these. I think it's their senior night. I'm not sure.
I believe that's correct. Yeah, because I think they go to Cabot week 10. I know they play Cabot. I think they go there week 10.
Well, there's some disdain here. There's some disdain. There's a rivalry, and it's neither team really likes each other. And I think North Little Rock really doesn't like Bryant. I think they really don't like them, and I think it's bothered them how they've lost the last couple of times. So I mean, if you're Randy Sandifer, I think you're really emphasizing that, like, hey, we got a chance to knock these guys off and end this streak on our senior night. Let's go out and do it. Let's play a clean game, not make some mistakes, and let's see how it goes into the fourth quarter.
Well, by the time that they play, so that'll be October 28th. That's just 2 days to the day after the 4-year anniversary of North Little Rock being the last team to beat the last state team to beat Bryant. So who knows what could happen?
And I called that game with Bob White on the Buzz. I was in the booth, and Bryant jumped out like a 21-7 lead in that game too. Yeah. People forget that North Little Rock had to come back.
Yeah. Bob and I called that game last year when I subbed in for RJ. So it was, anything can happen in rivalries. You never know. Yeah. So some other scores from this past Friday: Fayetteville rebounds from a loss to defeat Springdale 35-6. That one was at Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium. And then Bentonville West hammered Rogers Heritage 53-21. Conway earns its third shutout of the season. It was 48 or 49 over Central. I believe it was actually 49-0 over Central. And then just talking about North Little Rock, they've now won 3 in a row after they defeated Fort Smith Southside 38-14. And some of the big games this week, Bentonville, at least that we have in our rankings, are some of the teams that are looking pretty good right now. Bentonville heads to Springdale. Fort Smith Southside is at Bentonville West. Northside is at Cabot, and then Jonesboro heads to Conway. Harbor is at Rogers. Rogers Heritage is at Fayetteville. And then, of course, as I said, Bryant heads across the river to North Little Rock. Down in Class 6A, Little Rock Christian, they had a little bit of a scare from Van Buren, but they pull away 47-14 over the Pointers. Benton throttles Searcy, and Braylon Russell's, I think that was by far the best game that he's had as a Panther so far, had over 200 yards rushing on 26 carries. They beat the Lions 62-28. Catholic 42-6 over Jacksonville. That's the best start at 8-0 for the Rockets in school history. And Greenwood has another strong second half after a gritty Russellville squad that was on a 4-game win streak comes in and plays the Bulldogs tough, but Greenwood was able to play some more really good defense and get the offense going to win 42-21. Then Pulaski Academy over Greenbrier. The Bruins have scored at least 50 points in the last 4 contests. They're averaging around 55 points per game this year. That's not shocking when you think about the history of what they've been able to do dating back 20 years or so. But Nate, really this week, it all comes in class. And this is no disrespect to any other games going on, but I think all eyes, not just in Class 6A, but really across the state, is going to be on the Bruins heading to Greenwood for a monumental showdown that we've had circled. As Tim Terry said, they've had circled since July. I think probably a lot of us have also had that as well.
I'm going to give you my overall thoughts on this real quick, and then I want to play a game with you. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. My overall thought, I have thought that Greenwood should have been ranked higher the whole year. And you do the rankings. I thought the Stillwater game was held against them a little bit in other polls too. I think that they are a more complete team than Pulaski Academy, and I like Anthony Lucas and the staff over there. They're great. We'll find out on the field, but that's kind of what I feel like. Greenwood's defense has been undersold the whole year. I think that their defense has risen to the occasion. Lake Hamilton, you look at that game, they held them scoreless, and they play really good at home. I think it's going to be a factor. So I'm not saying that I favor Greenwood by any stretch. And I mean, like I said, Anthony Lucas is a great friend of mine. I've known him since he was in college, and the whole staff over there. But this is what I want to do right now. You give your arguments for why PA is going to win this ball game, and I'll give you my arguments on why I think Greenwood's going to win this game.
So for PA, well, I'll say first, the reason why we've had them ranked, I say it's our rankings, but the reason, I know that I put them together and everything. I will say that the reason why I had them there at first is because Greenwood, it was really tough because especially coming into the preseason, I think pretty much we've had Greenwood or Pulaski Academy's been at 3 or 4, and Greenwood's been anywhere from that 4 to 6 range. Like I said, the only reason why they dropped out is just because of Bentonville's 2 top 5 wins, but they, who knows what they could do if they beat PA. But with PA, the Madison Ridgeland win, and not just the way that they beat Madison, this year was a lot closer, the Madison Ridgeland game, than it was last year. It was like 63-39 last season. It was closer this year. But I think also, too, the way that Pulaski Academy, I don't always factor in the who do you beat and how you look doing it. But when you get into as high as this of a ranking, I think that you have to. And that's kind of the thing with Greenwood. The great win that they had against Fort Smith Northside, the way that they were able to come back, and they've won a lot of their games by lopsided margins, but they've had to really fight to get there. Now, you can also say about PA, and what is it, 4 of their 8 games, the opponent has struck first. But PA just turns it on, right? I mean, it seems like immediately after, whether it's the next drive or 2 drives later, they have really, to me, just played more complete 4-quarter games. Now, again, that does not necessarily mean that PA is a better team. We'll find out, really who is who, at least, a little bit. We'll get at least a piece of the pie of what it may be this coming Friday, and then maybe even a little bit more possibly in the playoffs or in a state championship. But I gave the nod to PA just again because, I mean, they have won. I know it was in Class 5A, but they won 7 of the past 8 Class 5A state championships last year. Greenwood may have been state champions had they gone into that game healthy. Of course, El Dorado was just on a really hot streak, and then PA was beat up and battered. What was it? I think Greenwood's won maybe 7 of the last 10 6A titles or something crazy like that. I don't know the exact stat, but I think that they are both pretty equally matched. They've both got over 50 plus. It's around like 53, 54 of straight games that they've won at their home stadiums, respectively. So to me, yeah, I think I'm with you as far as maybe having more of a complete defense, even though PA's played, it seems to me, better defense this year, maybe this year and last year, especially maybe than they have historically. And I'll tell you too, I think that probably the offenses that PA has had, especially with Joe, I mean, when you have a player like Joe Hyman, it just takes you to another level. And I really like Kenny Jordan. I love Jalen. I think Jalen McKinney is probably the most most underrated. Let me rephrase that. Most underrated player in the state in terms of not getting the kind of recruitment that I think he deserves. John Mark Charette out there. And again, I love Kenny Jordan. I love Kel Busby back there. I think the offensive line for PA is probably the biggest and maybe the best that it's been maybe since they won their first state title in 2003. Maybe you could go back even that far. Yeah. Some may disagree. But I think really what it boils down to, this is so unpredictable. Of course, you do probably give a little bit of the favoritism towards, at least the favoritism in terms of picking the game, towards Greenwood, because it is at their house. It's a very tough place to play. A lot of history there, and obviously a lot of tradition, just like there is at Joe B. Hatcher Stadium. But I think that either way, it could be one of those that comes down to the wire, and it could be 60-55.
Yeah, I think if you're going to that game, you better pack some snacks for a 10:30 ending or something like that, because it'll go slow. Yeah, I think that's why I would pick him. And if the game's in Little Rock, you probably go the other way, maybe, because of how well each team plays at home. I just think that maybe around the board, across the board, a little more complete. And then you look at the receivers at Carnes. I mean, and they've got one of the best receiving cores. I mean, PA's got a good receiving core too. They've got a good running back, their line. I mean, the defense. And I will say, I think a lot of times PA's defense has been undersold. I mean, you hear a lot about the offense and the no punting and all that, but they've had some good defensive players come through and some good defensive units. And I thought the last couple of years they've gotten even better. This year is one of the better ones in their line. I agree with you. It's good. I just kind of feel like that I would have picked, some prognosticators picked PA to win the West at the beginning. I would have picked Greenwood to win at the beginning. I'd pick them to win this game. I also could see whoever wins this game Friday night will lose a championship game if they play again.
I said the same thing about
Conway. Yeah, I believe that. Year. Yeah, you may not want to win this game. You may want to lose this one, because we know both these teams want to win at War Memorial Stadium, and they're good at doing that, and they've both done it. And that would be a heck of a game if that happens again. But hey, the one thing you can say about both these teams is that both staffs are super coaches. They're classy individuals. They coach and the teams play the way you're supposed to play football. I mean, they do it with a lot of class, with a lot of discipline. Both these teams are disciplined, and when you meet the kids and talk to these players, I mean, it's yes or no, sir. There's a tight ship run at both these programs, and that's refreshing. That's that way with a lot of teams, but it's been a tradition for both these ball clubs that you've got guys that are going to win the right way, and they're not going to give up. I mean, PA's been down, they've been and they come back. Like you said, that this year they've been down several times to start the game. They never feel like they're going to lose, and Greenwood's the same way. They don't ever feel like they're going to lose a ball game. But I respect both those staffs, and I think they both understand how to get the most out of kids, how to win football games. And I look forward to this one. And I think you can probably go on record right now that I see this game happening again. I really do. I think it'll happen
just like possibly Cabot Conway or what we're talking about in 7A there, Cabot Conway or Cabot Bryant Conway, whatever. Yeah, we could definitely see the same scenario in class.
I really do. But I know another thing too is that Smith Robinson Stadium is going to be bonkers.
Oh,
that place is going to be bonkers. And if the game was in Little Rock, I don't even know. They'd probably need to bring a shuttle bus in to get everybody into
It was super tight for Little Rock Christian when we were there with the bus. And
I know.
I can't even imagine. And just because of knowing, and look, Little Rock Christian travels well. I say travels well. They're 5 minutes away, or like
across the road. Yeah.
From PA, but Greenwood, even though they travel well, it doesn't really matter the sport. I mean, they think about the girls in the 5A state championship game for basketball with how well they traveled. I mean, it doesn't really matter the sport. They support them. So
it's going to be a fun one. I think it's going to be very, very similar to what we saw at Bryant. It's going to be like a playoff atmosphere. You're not going to be able to find a seat, and it's going to go down to the end, and you're going to bite off some of your nails if you're rooting for both of these teams.
Yeah,
I can't believe it wouldn't be down to the end. And like you said, a 60-55, an upper 50s type of game would be par. Even though these off defenses are good, they just score at such a good clip. And then the other thing you got to be careful with Greenwood is get those onside kicks, because that's where PA really hurts you. They get on a run like that, kind of in basketball, on that 10-0, 12-0 run in basketball. Same thing with these onside kicks. And I haven't seen how they've done lately, but early in the year they were struggling with the onside.
I know Little Rock Christian, they had not recovered one. I think they recovered two in the first half.
Yeah, and that was a big key in that game.
That was what really, I mean, it was close. It was very, it was like a 4 or 5 point game, something like that, maybe a touchdown. But yeah, that's when PA broke it wide open, and really after that, after halftime, just kept scoring. So
it's going to be a lot of fun. Anybody that goes to that game is going to be entertained, I guarantee you.
Yeah, and we certainly don't want to take away from all the other exciting games in Class 6A, because there are quite a bit, especially at this point in the season, that mean a lot, because you've got the PA Greenwood game, but you also got West Memphis coming to Benton. That's going to be senior night for the Panthers at the Jungle, Everett Field. There's a lot of different names there, but that's looking like the winner of that game is possibly going to be the second seed in the 6A East. So a really big game there. And of course, Benton's got a big one with the Marion team at the end of the season. Or actually, they might have played Marion. They play Marion week 10.
Pull them out. Hey, and just to interrupt you real quick, that is our SB Live Central Arkansas game of the week, Kyle.
The West Memphis game is?
Yes, sir. Yep.
That's right. Yeah, they played Marion. Who does Benton play? They played Marion a couple of weeks ago, and they beat them pretty good. That was when Marion was really beat up. They beat them 55-13. They play Sheridan. They go to Sheridan week 10. So yeah, this is you
may not be an easiest game as you think it would be on paper either, just because it's the end of the year and it's kind of a
year. Yeah, that's
rivalry game too. It's been a rivalry game in the past.
Yeah,
Sheridan will be kind of their Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing too is with West Memphis. They started off really well, lost that game. They were actually up on 16-14 at halftime on Catholic, and then things kind of fell apart for them there. You can say they fell apart, or really just Catholic just played really great defense and scored a lot there in the second half. And then really after that, West Memphis hasn't been bad by any means, but they haven't been quite the team that they were when they got off to that 4-0 start. So they're going to be really pumped up for this game, hopefully trying to get that 2-0 or that number 2 seed if you are the Blue Devils. So they're going to be a good one there. Also, too, Russellville going to be at Lake Hamilton. I mentioned just a second ago, they went to Greenwood, gave them a really tough, at least first half. Russellville's Coach Wheeler's done a really good job there, I think, and especially in such a tough conference, right? And I think actually going into that game, they were the 4th seed. I think Little Rock Christian is now taking. So basically, that's could be a game for the 4th seed in the 6A West. You think about it, Nate. Last year, I think Little Rock Christian was a 3 seed maybe in the 5A playoffs, and they were very dangerous. They beat Valonia, a team that was scoring X amount of points. They were one of the top offenses in Class 5A. Well, Little Rock Christian upset them by seeding, and you see Little Rock Christian as a 4 seed. That's not. I mean, that's a tough draw right there.
You got a 4-star, 5-star quarterback there, and I think they're playing better now.
Yeah, and they got a sophomore running back and Ronnie that's really good. Yeah,
I don't want to see them. And Eric Koyu, who is a proven championship coach,
state championship head. He's won state championship in Alabama.
Yeah, no, I don't want to see them coming to me in late November. I don't want to see that at all. They know how to win, and that West is like the Central. I mean, it's loaded, and it may even be a little more top to bottom better than the Central is.
No doubt about it. And then also too, Sylvan Hills is traveling to Marion. I believe if Sylvan Hills wins that game, they'll put themselves in prime position to get possibly the 6th seed. And we've seen, especially in 2020, but now last year they had an upset. They got upset by Mountain Home in the first round of the playoffs, but 2020 they turned it on about the second half of the season, so a little bit earlier than now. But, Marion's been a banged up team. They're playing a little bit better now that they're more healthy, but that's something that Sylvan Hills is trying to do, is keep their playoff hopes alive. And then Little Rock Christian is going to be at Greenbrier. And then, of course, as we talked about, PA at Greenwood. So down to Class 5A, Hot Springs, they continue to roll 55-14 over Arkansas High. Valonia, who has really picked it up, wins 37-17 over Whitehall. Prairie Grove is quietly 7-1 after beating Alma 45-20. Camden Fairview gets their second straight 49-0 shutout, and this time it was over Hope after beating the Queen last week. Nettleton 34-20 over Forest City. Parkview with the stellar offensive performance, 42-28 over Magnolia. Magnolia has now lost 3 straight in a row after starting off 5-0. Morrilton upsets Pine Bluff. I don't think many people saw this one coming. 28-13 that they beat the Zebras. Valley View continues to roll, squeezing past Southside Batesville 21-14. And then Wynn, playing without Coach Van Pascal, who is suspended, pummels Paragould 35-7. And a couple we'll discuss here. Of course, Shiloh, They pulled away from Farmington in the fourth quarter to win 51-30. It was 30-23 at the beginning of the fourth quarter. And then Farmington had tied it at 30 right on around the like 11-minute mark, 10:30 mark. But the Saints were just too powerful. Eli Wisdom, Nate, I'll tell you. So Eli Wisdom, he became the second player in state history to have over 5,000 yards passing and 3,000 yards rushing. The other one, AJ Whitmore. I know you covered AJ Whitmore.
Remember him? Yeah.
Years ago, I played against him, and I tell people to this day, and I've said it for 15 years, I think AJ Whitmore is probably the most underrated player to ever play in Arkansas. He ended up going to Tulsa. He was originally committed to Kansas State, but my Lord, he was as dual threat as dual.
Good at Tulsa too, right? I mean,
he played under Gus for about a year or two when Gus was the OC there. Did a really good job. Yeah, he was mainly he was with Charles Clay that played at Central and then had a pretty lengthy NFL career. But yeah, that's an incredible stat. I mean, that's just a great stat line regardless. But you think about the fact that Eli is the second player to do it in state history with all the athletes that we've had come through, particularly that have played at quarterback. That's absolutely phenomenal. So we'll stay on this one before we go to the Robinson Mills. But Nate, I'll tell you. So this was one that I really wrestled with to the point that I started asking other media members kind of that cover football and saying, hey, do you think I should maybe put Farmington here or Prairie Grove here? Because I want to give Prairie Grove their due credit. Prairie Grove, they've got a chance to really make a statement in these last 2 weeks. But I still think even though Farmington is 5-3 and Prairie Grove is 7-1, I went ahead and gave the nod to Farmington. And again, that's not any disrespect to Prairie Grove. We're not sleeping on them or anything like that. I think a lot of it, though, is I like Farmington's strength of schedule a lot more. And I also think about how they've played considering what they've gone through. You lose a player with the caliber of Cam Van Zant, and you only lose by a touchdown to a good Harrison team that could easily have 2 wins that it doesn't have right now because of some crazy finishes. You play a pretty good game for the most part against Rogers, and then you play pretty much 3 quarters and almost like 3.5 quarters against a Farmington team that's been blowing people out ever since getting blown out themselves by Shiloh Christian. I just feel like that Farmington probably just has the edge right here. But hey, Prairie Grove's really got a chance, like I said, to make a statement here over the next 2 weeks with their final 2 regular season games. But, I still like Farmington in that mix. I think Cam Van Zant should be back here pretty soon. Sam Wells has done a great job in his absence, kind of like a Cooper Rush, Dak Prescott type of situation. But that I got to say all that to say it's crazy how Shiloh Christian has really rebounded. Of course, Little Rock Christian had played a game already when they came off when they played Shiloh that in week 1 and just blew the Saints out. But Eli Wisdom, Bodie Neal, who eclipsed 1,000 yards, and also Bo Williams, the junior running back. He had 291 all-purpose yards against Farmington. They are just clicking on all cylinders. And hey, we could possibly see a Shiloh Christian Robinson 5A state championship like we saw in the 4A state championship.
Isn't that something? We talked about, like PA, they move up to 6A and people have them penciled in to go to the championship. Yeah. It's and I know that we were high on Robinson at the beginning of the year and Shiloh Christian, that if you made a list of title contenders, they're on it. I think it gave Prairie Grove a little bulletin board material. Danny Absher has been around 30 years. I think he's probably circling that. What you said, I think that, and I don't know what their record is against Shiloh Christian, but I don't know if they've probably beaten them a couple times somewhere, but not many. And they've got an opportunity. They've got an opportunity to do it. I mean, their running game is really good. And that's what they do every year. But I think it's clicking. You're right. They're probably a little under the radar. And they're a physical team. That's one thing about Shiloh is that up front, Cooper Dar and a couple other linemen, that are good. Some play both ways, I think, too. And then you mentioned Wisdom, and he's I've been kind of keeping track of him since he was a sophomore, and he won a state title, I think, as a sophomore, right? And
they beat Rivercrest. Yep.
Yeah, and he is stuck out with his leadership ability, even as a young guy, and his durability to be able to run. I had heard early in the year that there were some schools, Division I schools, that were looking at him to play position other than quarterback. I think he's got a UCF offer at QB, but there's some other schools now that are more interested. I think Arkansas was
Arkansas
interested
was
in
one,
him,
yeah.
at some other positions. So he's a gifted athlete, but I think probably if you talk to Coach Jeff Conaway, the thing that sticks out more for him is that he's a good kid and a guy that you want leading your football team. And he's done that since he was a sophomore, and he continues to do that. And as a senior, there's so many things you can do with a guy like that. I mean, he's got the keys to the offense, knows that like the back of his hand with being a 3-year starter, and probably is one of the big reasons. I mean, there's several reasons why they're in this position, but I think he is one of the big reasons why you would right now think that they have a very good chance of winning a championship in the 5A division.
Yeah, no doubt. And the other one in class, it seems like, so before I go to this one with Mills and Robinson, other than the Fort Smith Northside and Greenwood finish, all the really exciting ones seem to be in Class 5A. And we had this on Dixon Road the other night. I've actually got the clip that I'll play here from that finish, or at least down to when it came to the final 28 seconds. Basically, with Noah Freeman and pretty banged up, with Noah Freeman not in, along with a lot of other guys not playing, for at least a few other key guys not playing for Robinson. Just what a great job. We talked, or like, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, about the job that Farmington's done of plugging Sam Wells in from defensive back and having to overcome that adversity. Well, I think Robinson's done a really good job too of replacing a guy that is just such a big loss like Noah Freeman amongst others. But you also got to hand it to Mills as well. This is one that I think that myself and many others have slept on this year, and they continue to really prove people wrong. And look, I still think they still prove people wrong, regardless if they came up just a little bit short. I don't think that you can hold a 1 point end of the game type loss against them. The Comets have looked really, really good this year, but went for two at the very end of the game. I think if I was Cortez Lee, I probably would have done the same thing. And Robinson did a great job of stopping him. But we got the call here courtesy of Natural State Sports. It was a fantastic finish over there on Dixon Road. And here was at least the final play before they got to kick it off to Robinson in order to finish the game there. They're going to try that outside again. We got
they stopped him. They stopped him.
He's going to be stopped. Your Senator defense make the stop. The 2-point conversion is not good. The Senators hold. And with 28 seconds left to go in the game, your score is 29 Senators, 28 Mills Comets.
I don't even know who came in there. It may have been Chase Nichols. It may have.
That was the Robinson Sports Network guys there. Chris Goodman, I believe Tyler Fountain was his name. Chris Goodman was the play-by-play guy there with a lot of great enthusiasm. And, again, there was 28 seconds left, so I guess Robinson did get the ball back and ran the clock out, as I said. But just I'll tell you, Nate, if you saw how this play went down, they ran to I think it was Jabray Shaw for Mills that ran to the left. And for a split second there, it looked like the hole was wide open for him to pretty much just step into the end zone. But what a great job by the Robinson defense. That just shows the kind of athleticism that they have.
Oh, yeah.
That up and keep them from crossing the line.
Well, and that's what I was going to say about the Freeman situation. That's another team, even though they're one of the smaller teams in 5A, but they've got athletes all over the roster. They got guys that maybe aren't as good as Freeman, but they're good. They're good athletes, and the guys are on defense, and they've got big guys on that front seven. And I applaud Cortez Lee for going for it, though. I would have done the same thing. I think Cortez Lee would have done that a long time ago when he was coaching at Altimer and Dollarway or wherever he's been. That's Cortez Lee. And I think you got a chance to, you take the lead there. You've got a really good chance to win if you can keep them from returning a kick or something. And I don't think anybody really wants to go into overtime with being on the 10-yard line. I mean, it's one of those things where it could go on forever. And so I think avoiding overtime is a good thing if you can do it. And I applaud him for going for it, and applaud Robinson for the stand. And I think these are two teams that can meet again. And I think these are two teams that could be in Little Rock. I really do. I think Mills has playmakers all over the field too. And Shaw has proven to be one of the great players around, regardless.
Jabray is another one, along with Jalen McKinney that might be the most underrated in the state as well.
Yeah,
he's going to UCA, and look, UCA is a great program and everything, but I think with what Jabray has done this year and even what he did last year before the injury, he is special. I mean, he is a special talent.
Yeah, and 5A, a lot of guys do not play two positions. You see a lot of teams at 5A do not do two platooning. He plays both. I think that might be a new thing too, Kyle, playing DB. I don't know that he played that as much last year. I'd have to look. I
think that's what UCA has recruited him as. I believe. I think he is going to play defense there.
Well, adding, we knew him more as a high-profile running back last year, and he's played other places on offense too. I think it's receiver too, playing DB. But yeah, no, I think that there would, so two things. He's one of the nation's leaders in interceptions, nation's leading receivers in the nation in interceptions. And then I think that there's probably other schools in Division I that would look at him now. I don't know if he'll open the recruiting up, but I think he's proven that he is a Division I talent. I really do. I think with his versatility, a guy that can hurt you in the special teams. I mean, that guy can score in three ways. I mean, he scored, I think, on kickoffs, he scored on offense, and he scored with an interception return, or at least one, maybe two. So, yeah, dangerous guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about for the past couple of weeks how the 5A East is just crazy right now, and it still is for the most part. But if Valley View keeps winning, then things will look pretty good for the most part, just because sorry, my stepdaughter was telling me good night there.
Good night. Good night.
But if Valley View continues to keep winning, they're sitting at 5-0 right now in conference play. So if they keep winning, then that whole conference will take care of itself. And then also too, you've got Wynn and Batesville sitting at 4-1. Now Wynn does own the tiebreaker with I believe it was a 23-10 win that they had victory. Every time I talk about win, I try not to use the word win. I try to use victory instead, just so I don't confuse myself here.
The win-win.
I think they beat Batesville 23-10 a couple of weeks ago is what the score was. And then also Nettleton sitting at 7-1. So assuming that Valley View continues to take care of business, then that will be much easier to keep up with. But Valley View does have a big pretty with Nettleton this week. And again, we say it just about every week. Nettleton could easily be 8-0 right now had they not lost that crazy last pretty much walk-off loss to Batesville. So, and then also in the 5A East, you've got Batesville at Southside Batesville, and then also known as Southside. I know that they prefer to just be called that up there, but of course we cover more than one Southside. And then Forest City is at Wynn. And then in the 5A, let's see, it's 5A Central. We're just talking about Mills. They've got a dangerous Morrilton team. They go there. So Mills has two road games to finish out the regular season against starting with a dangerous Morrilton team. And then also a Valonia team in week 10 that's really began to pick things up. Whitehall travels to Robinson, and then Shiloh Christian will play at Prairie Grove. And then in the 5A South, Camden Fairview goes to Hot Springs. That's going to be the 103.7 The Buzz game of the week. You can catch us on there along with the SB Live halftime show. Coverage will begin at 6:45 for that. So some unfinished business in the 5A South there. Camden Fairview and Hot Springs could be playing at least for the second spot. And then Camden Fairview's got Parkview in week 10. So a little bit of stuff to clean up there in the 5A South. And going down to 4A, I want to congratulate Tommy Shoemaker. He got his 200th career victory as CAC beat Dover 41-14. Elkins mauls Ozark 48-21, and they're in good position to win the 4A1. And then also Rivercrest is big over Gosnell 48-20. That was a huge game for 2-seed implications in the 4A3 behind Pocahontas. Stuttgart 38-6 over Heber Springs. Nashville 41-6 over Waldron. Pocahontas throttles Jonesboro Westside 41-7. Harding Academy 44-6 over Riverview. And then this one, Nate, I think was a little bit shocking. Not necessarily because of, Ashdown was a bad team or anything like that, but they haven't played particularly well. They're actually a very talented team, but haven't played particularly well previous to this Arkadelphia game. But Arkadelphia was pushed by Ashdown as much as they have been probably since the hot spread. I said this in the rankings blurb. this week that this is probably the most that the Badgers have been pushed since week 1 against Hot Springs. I think it was week 1. But the Badgers were able to pull away late in the third quarter. Donovan Witten had another big night, but it was really the Badger defense that came through, forcing 4 turnovers. So that was a little bit of a surprising one there, I think, for a lot of people. Of course, you got Malvern that's playing at Nashville this week. It's looking like that Ashdown right now, it's going to be Nashville and Ashdown that are battling for that 3rd and 4th playoff seed out of the 4A7. And then, of course, that conference should be decided, you would expect, whenever Arkadelphia travels to Malvern in week 10. But we've talked some about the 4A8. We've talked some about the 4A1, how there's some sleeper teams in there when you think about Gentry, and now especially Elkins, when you got Deshaun Chairs, another underrated running back in the state, and also Slade Dizzy Dean, the transfer from Greenwood that's done a really good job there for the Elks. But I want to focus this time on the 4A3. You know, I think that there's some really quality teams there, of course, starting with Pocahontas. Connor Baker is on the verge of breaking the state's, I believe it's the state's all-time rushing touchdown record, around like 7 or 8 away from that. But on top of that, Rivercrest has really made huge strides. They started 4-3 up till last week, but really have played well in conference. I think Gosnell's a quality team. And then you also think about Blytheville, who's made a lot of big strides this year. They got a great rushing attack. But Pocahontas with Connor Baker, I think that they are a true legit threat, starting with them at the top of the 4A3 to do some major damage in the playoffs.
I do too. And I think, you know, Baker makes them go. He's a Division I caliber linebacker. He plays, so, you know, you don't see that often, a quarterback that plays linebacker, but he is tough as nails. He runs the ball. Yeah, I think that they're a legitimate contender. And, you know, the other teams you mentioned, Gosnell, Blytheville, Rivercrest, very good athletes across the board, can put up some points on offense. And so, yeah, they could give some teams some trouble too in the playoffs. That's a good league. And I I think Pocahontas would be the pick that, you know, that it should get a good draw. And being up there in Northeast Arkansas, somebody's gonna have to drive a long way to play them. Yeah. And with Baker, I think this could be the year they get really far. It just seems to be kind of setting up right for that.
Well, and I think the difference too is last year, I don't think they passed the ball hardly at all. Like Mike Malham hardly at all.
Yeah.
This year, now he was 4 for 4 the other night on Friday night for 114 yards for 2 touchdowns. They've really thrown it a lot. I think that puts them at around the 850 mark, whereas last year, now I could be completely wrong, but I feel like he really didn't have but maybe 300 or 400 or 500 total yards all season. That's including the playoffs. So I think they're passing it, they're doing it effectively. He's pretty much a dual, like you said, at the next level. He projects as a linebacker, or maybe, who knows, maybe someone might test run him at tight end or receiver or running back or something, who knows. But the fact that he's pretty much a true dual threat this year, I think, has really made a difference. And that's one team, you know, when you think about it, talk about the Class 4A, I think that many, and rightfully so, are talking about the Malverns and the Arkadelphias. And then, of course, you always look at Warren whenever you get to the playoffs. Star City and the 4A8 is another really good one. But I definitely am really high on what Pocahontas has done there in the 4A3. I think they're going to be a force with once we get to the postseason, especially. But yeah, some of the top games for week 9, a struggling West Helena team, a struggling and very small West Helena team in terms of numbers. They head to Warren. Blytheville is at Pocahontas. Elkins is at Gentry. That should all but decide the 4A1. And then Harding Academy heads to Heber Springs. Mayflower is at undefeated Haskell Harmony Grove. And then Stuttgart heads to Lone Oak. The winner will more than likely claim the number 2 seed behind Harding Academy in the 4A2. And then also Malvern heads to Nashville. I think I mentioned that just a second ago. Down to Class 3A, Center Point stays undefeated and rolls Paris 42-7. Glen Rose 35-8 over 2 Rivers. Camden Harmony Grove 60-14 over Fordyce. Mansfield edges Lavaca 21-20 to give the Golden Arrows their second straight loss. Quitman is playing really, really well right now, and they defeat Perryville 48-34. Melbourne continues its best start in school history, led by Trey Wren. What a great year he's having. There's many others that are doing really well for the Bearcats, but he's been especially special. They defeat a really solid Newport team 29-20. Risen also remains undefeated after taking care of Lake Village, and my dumb butt did not put the score on that one. Prescott rolls smack over 47-20. And then there was another one too. Let's see. I think Did I mention that? I think I left this one out, but oh yeah, Camden Harmony Grove, 60-14 over Fordyce. Look, Camden Harmony Grove's a good football team. They're one of the more athletic ones in Class 3A, but I don't think anybody saw 60-14 over Fordyce. Now, that was a really tough loss that Fordyce is coming off of, losing to Rise in there and literally pretty much the final play. And then, of course, giving up the interception or fumble, whatever you want to call it there at the end on the lateral kickoff. Yeah, I guess it was an interception because they lateraled it. But, man, I didn't see this kind of deficit. That's big. That's a huge blowout win there for Camden Harmony Grove over Fordyce. So a big one for what's their mascot? The Hornets. I think that they're really big one there for them. But also too, this is one that is very misleading. And look, you don't want to take anything away from Charleston, but 42-14 over Booneville, but it was one of the big 3A games of the week. But there were some players that did not play in this game. Of course, many of us know the backstory in that. We're not going to go into details here. That's not our place to do. But I think I will say this. I think that Charleston did make a big statement despite all of that, because regardless, Booneville's struggled on defense this year. So I don't know having those guys back, if having those guys in this game would have made a ton of difference. But the fact of the matter is that, look, right now, Charleston is in the driver's seat for the 3A1 after that win. I know a lot of Booneville people are very upset about it because, this is one that they felt should have been a lot closer had they had those starters that initially should have been there. But, hey, you got to feel really good if you're Charleston right now with where you're sitting.
Well, when you're Charleston, you can only play who's out there.
Exactly.
You can only play who showed up. But, yeah, you're disappointed if you're Booneville because you've got a good football team. This was supposed to be a showdown, and you weren't playing anywhere near full strength. Like 8 or 9 guys didn't play, and some real key players. So that is disappointing. I mean, there's no way to deny that, but Charleston and Brandon Scott, I mean, what can you say about that offense? I think he's another guy that flies under the radar when you talk about quarterback, Kyle. I mean, if that guy was at a bigger school, I think we're talking more about him. I mean,
2-time All-State quarterback and basketball player.
Yeah. And Leland Barclay said on our air on the scoreboard show that he thinks he's one of the best athletes to come out of that River Valley in quite some time, when you consider about what he does do in basketball, and then also an accomplished golfer too over there. So he's a multi-sport guy, a guy we probably need to keep on our radar when we're looking at athlete of the year later in the year. I think he definitely would be a guy that you'd consider for that with the different things that he does. But football wise, quarterback, he probably doesn't get, you talk about the Amolos of the world and guys like that, and Eli Wisdom, but what he has done, I think he could even do it at the larger level too, because he's a dual threat guy and he's got a good arm and can really pass the football.
I muted myself there. And I think that every week it seems like, and mostly me that says this, because I tend to maybe put one team on a pedestal and leave a few more out, but I think in the 3A2, Melbourne really sitting at 8-0. Quitman's playing really, really well. DJ Mars has got those guys rolling, and Newport's also a really quality team too. There's 3 quality teams there that could make so, because Newport's, they got Chris Young that's been one of the top rushing leaders in the state this year. Also too, what's the Isaiah? He's committed to Jackson State, their receiver that's extremely fast. His last name is slipping my memory right now. But they've got a lot of athletes there at Newport as well. I mentioned Trey Wren at Melbourne. Those are some guys, some teams that I think that, especially with Melbourne, we were kind of wondering exactly how far they could go, because I don't think that many people thought that year one understood that they did pretty good last year. They have done pretty well over the last few years, but I don't know that anybody saw them sitting at 8-0 in year one under Stu Smith.
You realize he's a rookie head coach too?
Yeah, he's been a defensive coordinator or assistant for over 3 decades, but yes, first time head coach.
Yeah, I mean, how many guys? So he's probably like close in his 60s, like somewhere around there.
Probably so,
he's
yeah.
like a career politician, and I mean, he's been a representative. I mean, he's still right now. Yeah. His term ends in January, and I was reading about this story that when he announced that he was not going to run again, that the school district came to him and asked him if he'd teach. He said yes. Then the coach that was there left, and then they said, "Would you be the head football coach?" And I think he was a little hesitant at first to do that. I mean, you're talking about a big commitment, and you should be. I mean, at that age, maybe kind of scaling back a little bit. You've been a politician all these years, and some of the stuff that he's been involved in. But boy, that's a great story. I mean, and the fact that you're a rookie head coach, but like you said, he's been at Van Buren, he's been at Batesville, and you've been in those programs, and you've been a coordinator. I mean, you're ready to be a head coach. And I don't know why he wasn't before, but I think Melbourne's glad it's his first time. And that's a very young program too. Like the last maybe 10 years, they started their program at Melbourne.
10, 15 years, I believe, something like that.
Okay. It's pretty young.
Yeah.
It's a pretty young program. And I know they're excited. That's a basketball school. You know, their women program. We've talked all about their women's program. Yeah, that's a basketball place, but they decided that they wanted to play football. And I think it's a energize their community to have such a good football team up there right now. And that's the thing with me that I'm wondering, what's going to happen when they play a Charleston or somebody like that, a proven winner, or maybe has to go on the road to one of those places. If they did, that would be my only question. But for right now, it is a very, very good story.
Well, and this week you've got, let's see, I think it's Melbourne goes to Quitman this week. So obviously a really crucial match there in the 3A2. And then also as well in the 3A4, you've got undefeated Center Point that is going to Glen Rose. Now that should decide the 3A4 right there. Coach Keener, he talked about whenever we did for the Buzz, I think we did it was the Fordyce game. So that was the last non-conference game that Glen Rose and Fordyce had played. And that's one thing that Keener's going to do. He's going to schedule tough, really try to, there's a lot of coaches that do that to really kind of figure out where to put who, where. And that was really what he was telling me that week was, look, we got a lot of dudes, or we got some guys that we feel really good about, but we don't know exactly where they're going to go. Heath Balance is certainly going to be your running back. You knew that, but kind of some of the other spots, whether it be in the interior line or skill positions, they weren't really sure. But Glen Rose has really gotten it together. They're 4-0 in conference. They're 5-2 overall. And then Center Point is 5-0 in conference, 8-0 overall. So a really big one there in the 3A4. So look, right now I think it's still Prescott. And I think most people would probably agree with that, but there's always somebody in there that you always got. Because look, it's going to be an interesting field. It's going to be a lot of interesting matchups. It seems to me that even with Harding Academy and McGee in 3A, past those two, and even Hoxie's been another one that's been really good over the last 3, 4, 5 years. It always seemed like there was intriguing matchups across the board. Now, once one of those teams met a Harding Academy, or once one of those teams met a McGee, it might not have always gone good for them. But I think this year, Prescott's certainly the favorite to get back to War Memorial and maybe win it this year. But still plenty to talk about there as the names that we just mentioned. So some of the other top games in Class 3A, Rison will go to Barton. Boonville's at Lavaca, and then, as I mentioned, Center Point's at Glen Rose. West Fork will head to Charleston, and then Yellville Summit is at Newport. And then last but not least, Class 2A, Carlisle crushed Baptist Prep, led by another strong performance from Jason Sullivan, one of the top running backs, maybe the top running back in Class 2A. Mark Tree beats Clarendon 44-30. Dirks edges Poen 21-20. EPC rebounds to beat Mariana Lee 62-12. Hazen shuts out Episcopal 46-0. Mount Ida Mount Ida Deaf Man. That's another one that I made a mistake on. Mount Ida didn't beat Mount Ida by a lopsided 35-6. It was Mineral Springs. It was Mineral Springs. I remember that off the top of my head. I think it was because it was two schools that started with an M. I put that in there. But Mount Ida beats Mineral Springs 35-6. And Nate, that was one of our discussions last week that we had, just kind of going through maybe a handful or so of contenders. And to me right now, there is no two schools that are playing more complete football than Carlisle and Hazen. And that's along with Conway and Bryant, along with Malvern, Arkadelphia. I don't care if it's 2A. I don't care if it's negative 10A. That is going to be one of the top matchups in the state. I guarantee you it's going to be packed because Carlisle and Hazen, that's two big rivalries. They're right.
Yes.
As I said, my cousins went to school there and know all about that. And they were there in the early 90s at Carlisle when Carlisle could have won plenty of state championships, but Barton kept that from happening. But these two schools are as good as they've been in a long time, and they are just both clicking on all cylinders, both offensively and defensively.
Yeah, you mentioned Sullivan, Luke King at Hazen, good quarterback. Yeah. Those are small town players that are big time playmakers, and I agree with you. I think that those are the teams you look at in 2A, and we've had some good playoffs in 2A. That's even though it's a smaller school, there's been some good matchups there and good championship games too.
And then and so it's 11 minutes. It's literally, I mean, Carlisle is literally, I knew it was right down the street pretty much, but if you type it in on your maps, it's just a straight line north, or I guess, I think it's maybe east. Yeah, east. So it's just a straight line east. And I want to say that highway, it's Highway 70. So the build up for that, not only the game itself, but the build up, I mean, this has got to be, you have to think, because I mean, I don't think Carlisle, they were pretty good under the Bo Weddle days, but was that around the time? Was that around the time that Hazen lost to Junction City in the state championship in 2014? So we
need to get a lifeline with Mr. Mark Buffalo.
Yeah,
he's the walking encyclopedia for several different schools, Cabot included, but also Carlisle, where he.
Yeah, Buffalo and I will be definitely talking a lot that week 10 because that'll obviously be one of our top 10 games to watch, and I'll need some of his insight for that blurb. But yeah, I mean, of course, with the 2A2, it definitely got more interesting with EPC losing a couple of weeks ago, and then Mark Tree currently sits at the top of that. So it's definitely interesting there, and I still think EPC, especially with the way that they run the ball, they're a contender as well. But Mount Ida too, and I'll say too that look out for Poe, and Mount Ida and Dirks are definitely two to watch in that conference. But Poe, the way that the Vic Barrett has done there, and now they lost Colton Lowe and they lost a lot after last year, but they just lost to Dirks by a point. It was 20, like I said just a second ago, it was 21-20, and they've got a really great coaching staff. So I'm not necessarily saying they're going to win a state championship, but that might be one that could ruin somebody's party once we get in, because they're looking like around the 3 seed right now that they may get, will the Indians. So, but yeah, right now it's just really hard for me to find a team that is clicking on, or two teams that are clicking on all cylinders, because Hazen and Carlisle have both had multiple shutouts. They've both had multiple games where they've scored over 50 plus points. To me, man, it's pretty much them and everybody, maybe just those two at the top, and then a couple of others just maybe slightly below them. So
agreed.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be a fun one to watch there in week 10. I know many, especially in that area, are looking forward to that. But some of the other top games for week 9, Bigelow's at Conway Christian, Earl heads to Clarendon, East Poinsett County's at Des Arc, Mount Ida's at Foreman, Mark Tree's at Cross County, Carlisle is at England, and then Poen heads to Mineral Springs. That one should be a good one, I think. And guys, of course, don't forget, on our website, we've got basketball previews. We've done 1 through 3A up to this point. We're going to have more coming, along with the player list here pretty soon. I'm also going to have a new Gridiron Icons episode, which I need to probably get on here. I've got some details worked out for that. Just hadn't gotten anything confirmed, but that one will be at the end of the month. And then also too, we've got volleyball state tournaments this week. Jeff Halpern has done a exceptional job of doing statewide coverage, usually doing also about a game a week in the Central Arkansas area. So we've got a couple more weeks of volleyball rankings out, and along with 8-man coverage. Of course, the 8-man sanction, or the club division, they start their playoffs this week. You got Subiaco Academy and Fountain Lake, and then also Genoa Central and Mountain View playing in the semifinals. So that's wrapping up, and then the sanction rankings, of course, will go through the regular season, and just like they did last year. But got all kinds of stuff on our site, along with all the football stuff. And then, as I said, basketball is really good. It's already started for the non-football schools, but it is quickly approaching here, as a lot of the teams are going to get started here in the first week of November here pretty soon. So a lot going on. But Guys, as always, we thank you for joining us. You can always listen to the podcast on the website, of course, under the Arkansas tab or on Spotify. If there's anything else that we're missing, please let us know at arprepextra@gmail.com. For Nate Olson and all of us here at SB Live, I'm Kyle Sutherland. We will catch you next time.